How the f is that? Oh, I was picking up my voice fine. Microphone's much better. So, good morning, everyone, again. This is the second time I've set up to record. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about Bitcoin, the unchanging pillar of trust in our society. Bitcoin doesn't change, just like gold. An element that was born from the stars that has not changed since it was formed. We use that as money because money is a measuring stick. If we have an economy that's about that big and we're using a measuring stick that's this big to measure it, if we increase the size of our measuring stick, this is no longer the same unit size. You can't measure things properly if your unit of measurement is always changing. The French understood this, which is why they came up with the ISO standards. If you don't know, when we discovered that the world was round, the French decided to create a unit of measurement, distance, that was unchanging for everyone on the planet. And the best way to do that is to take the globe, its radius, and then measure how many units is in its circumference. The French decided kilometer, good way of measuring distance for everyone in the world, because it's based on the size of the world. Talk about money. The only thing we've really had as a measuring stick that has been unchanging is gold or a precious metal of some kind. If we have gold in terms of a totality of how much there is in the world, basically a straight line. In terms of what's accessible to humans, it started probably here and then it goes up and it'll peter off, but maybe we start exploring space and then, it goes up even further. Even gold is not a very good measuring stick because the quantity of it in the economy is changing. Bitcoin does not change. The rules of Bitcoin are set. If you want to play a chess game and your opponent starts playing checkers, you're going to be concerned about when's the knight going to be delegated to only moving one step forward like a pawn. It's just not possible to get to the end game if someone keeps on changing the rules. In Bitcoin, you vote on what the last block was. Was it valid or not? That's the only thing you're voting on. This is the current block that everyone's trying to find. Remember this from the previous videos? Then you've got the transactions that they are building out. And when this block is found, when they find this, the miner that finds it sends it out to all the other miners in the network. This miner finds this block. They then have to publish it to all the other miners. Once the other miners receive it, they confirm it's a valid block, and then they vote that it is valid by mining on top of it. So the network moves forward. This is now the current. It was there. Again, once the miner finds this block, sends it all to the other miners. Why is it 10 minutes? Well, you need to give people time to validate your block and then vote that it is valid. The time it takes to verify a block is potentially seconds or milliseconds. The time it takes to produce the next block and confirm it in the historical record of the blockchain is to get all the other miners to build on top of your block. Okay? The longer this gets, the more certain people are that it's not going to be undone. If you're a miner and you're sending out a block that you've just found, you don't want to go through a bunch of people. These are not mining nodes. They're not got hash power on the network. They're not transaction processors. But then you've got the big miner, right, behind these entities. You don't want to go through these entities because, again, it takes time for them to do all their checks and then forward it on. Yeah, we want things to happen as fast as possible. So what do the miners do? They connect directly, like a VPN tunnel. They just send it directly to other miners. In the Bitcoin network, what you end up having is a bunch of miners with hash power all connected to one another. They are all directly connected. This type of network where everyone is attempting to connect to everyone else is known as a small world network. If this person wants to talk to this person, they only have to go through a maximum of 3 hops. The optimum number of hops through this network is more than 1, because you can never have a big network that is less than 1, but less than 2. So that would mean that everyone is basically as tightly packed together as physically possible. This is very different to the networks we were showing you earlier. Effectively, the Bitcoin miners are all sitting at a table. They're all sitting at a table and then voting on whether they think this block is valid or not valid. They're doing this electronically. The hash in the block header, you cannot fake a block, which means that this data can get through the internet unchanged and unmanipulated by any party that might have to pass it on throughout our regular internet infrastructure. These miners are voting, but they're only voting on whether this block, the most recent block, is valid. If they say no, everyone ignores it, and we wait until we do get a valid block. A lot of people seem to think that the mining network could be used to compute something other than hashes and still vote on this thing at the same time. If you understand voting, you may have come across Arrow's theorem, Nobel Prize winning theorem. It was sometime in the 50s, I can't remember the exact dates. Essentially, is that you cannot have a voting system that is effective when you are voting on more than one thing at a time. And if you are using the hashing to find the next block to do something other than voting on whether the current block is valid, creating a issue in which that vote can be manipulated. In essence, Arrow's theorem states that we can only ever vote on one thing at a time. So, if we can only vote on one thing at a time, whether or not this block is valid, we're voting on whether this block is valid by putting hash power on top of this. So we're extending the chain further. How does this affect protocol changes? If you vote on both whether this block is valid instead of this one, yeah, and a protocol change, so this is a slightly different formatted block, then we have an issue with Arrow's theorem, which is a Nobel Prize winning theorem. Okay, so you're not going up against me on protocol changes. You're going up against the shoulders of giants that I am standing on by telling you that this is how Bitcoin works. I don't know whether you can hear those over the new microphone, but I have police sirens currently going past. I live in an interesting area in Amsterdam, and the power's just gone off. This is definitely going in there. Had the alarm the other video. Now police sirens and a power out. Interesting. Let me go and figure out what the hell is going on. So I've investigated what's going on. The entire street has lost power. South Africa only has power for 3 hours a day, by the way. Power rations are coming, I believe. After all, we're living through a climate emergency, and something needs to be done about it, doesn't it? Yeah, something needs to be done. Whilst this is going on, let me continue. We've got the miners that are voting around a table, and they're voting on whether this is valid. If you have another block, it comes in slightly later. Got a time difference here. Sorry about the small drawing. There's a lot of details and stuff. So we've got a delta time there. This block is smaller, less data. So it actually validates before. This block being the one to be built on could be valid. However, it must contain transactions that are not conflicting with this one that was seen first. Why? Because it's the first seen rule. Most of the things I've talked about are time critical. It's like a race condition. If someone is able to intercept a payment and then perform fraud and then get it into a block that is after the one that was seen first, you can know that that is an attempted double spend because there is no other reason for that transaction to be there. We are, again, admitting to fraud in this scenario. We vote on what transactions are valid. We do not vote on the rules of the protocol. Maybe a transaction is not valid under these rules. If we change the rules, suddenly it becomes valid. This is a bit of a strange situation to be in. It's better than this is valid and then suddenly it's not. Money in our pocket, it's not money if we can't spend it. If this network says your money that was valid before is no longer, we have a problem, don't we? The way to fix this is very simple. The rules of the network do not change. If they change, we can create conditions in which you can't use your money anymore. And doesn't that sound like something that Bitcoin was supposed to kind of stop? Law-abiding citizens not being able to use their money anymore? Bitcoin is still just software. And sometimes software does need to be updated. Say, for example, the signing algorithm you used outdated cryptography. It breaks. We get issues with hashes sometimes where the car crash scenario happens, where we have two pieces of data resulting in the same one. If this happens, it's broken. It's just broken. We no longer have a unique ID identifier for this piece of data. This is supposed to be completely unique for that, so that we can prove that we've got this file with just this number. If we have two of these, we can't prove that we've got this file because we might have this one. When this happens to a hash function, it needs to be changed. That's when you change it. You change it when there's a problem. If it ain't broke, don't fucking touch it. You don't want someone touching your money and changing the rules of it, do you? Why would you? That's the system we're trying to escape. What was next? So what else can change? We have these things called opcodes, and opcodes are like pluses, minuses, multiplications, divisions, merges. If you've got two pieces of data that are separated, you want to join them. These sorts of functions in opcodes. Or you can append data. These opcodes are in transactions. So we have block headers and then the transactions down here. And I will draw this out every time because people forget that this is how it works. This stuff is all in here so that we can have little computer programs running over this computer network. A computer program that only needs this transaction can run happily. If it needs to compute everything, it's not going to work, remember? We only need the things that that transaction prove are in here. That's why it's scalable. You can have a distributed computing network that's verifiably correct over Bitcoin because this little guy is checked. At the beginning of Bitcoin, there were empty opcodes that would be used to add things if they were ever required. However, those things that would be required are things like changing the hash function when it breaks. So to round this off, money, the most natural form of money, is a commodity. And commodities are distinctly different from securities. The way I would describe and define this is by saying that a commodity is defined by a standard that's like 99.9% pure gold. And if you ever change that standard, you don't change the underlying material. All you've done is you've created a new standard, and therefore a new commodity can then have financial products built on top of it. You don't change the standard and then port or over all the previous agreements. Securities, on the other hand, are controlled by partnerships or individual, can be issued after the company was first created. The company also has a cash flow of productivity occurring, money being traded hands for goods and services, and then a profit being given to the owners of that company. If you own a commodity, it is doing nothing other than sitting there. And the thing about commodities is that they tend to be pretty useful. We want to put them in things. So there is a demand for your commodity that's just sitting there. And if that demand increases, the value of your commodity that you're holding goes up. This is not financial advice. This is educational content. So if you can't change a commodity because by definition you create a new one when you change the standard, what happened in 2017? What happened in 2019? Bitcoin is not what you think. You guys need to wise up because we're getting psyoped left, right, and center, and that has real consequences. I, at the moment, don't have electricity in my apartment, and that could be because some politician made a decision that we are consuming too much electricity. We are a disease on the planet. I didn't vote for that. Did you? So this is my local Albert Heijn, the place I go and get my lunch every day. And it closes when there's no power, of course. What else did you expect? We need to be able to use Bitcoin without power, without phones. You know, like almost pieces of paper, something that cannot be screwed with, something that cannot be turned off. Because if you can't turn it off, then you're safer, aren't you? Some people have power, some people don't. Closed. No power for these guys, but because they're accepting cash, they're still able to do business, aren't they? Cash. But whatever. It is basically just my block. Now, construction. Could have been someone just cut a power line by mistake. Apple's empty. No electricity. It may have been the guys here cutting through a power line. Hopefully they fix it soon and we get our power back. Just to confirm, we're on my street. This is a McDonald's. Closed. In there talking. So, the power's back, which is great. You can only vote on one thing at once. Bitcoin can only vote on the next block, not protocol changes. So that power outage was basically just our block, as you saw from that footage. Like I said, it was probably a construction worker that cut through a power line and then they quickly spliced it together or redirected. I don't know. But these things do happen.